So we have to use the microphone. I'd rather be close to you, but and our speaker be closer to you. But if we use the microphone, they'll be able to hear. Will this be on YouTube? Yes. Yes.
Will we post it on our district website?
Testing. All right, well, good evening. Thank you for taking the time to be here this evening. We know this is a very important issue to discuss, not only in our district and our community, but across our county and in our state. And I want to thank you for making the time to be here. Tell your friends that it will be online, and Lance is going to give you the information that you need. Lance is our public information officer. My name is Callie Binks, and I'm the school superintendent. And we work very closely with a lot of partners, one being the Sheriff's Department, who we appreciate very much. And we have our local Ukiah Sheriff's Department, and of course our county Sheriff's Department. And so I want to thank Lieutenant Lopez, and then Lance is going to introduce you to our speaker. But before we get started, I want to let you know in the back, we have some community resources for you, and we have a flyer for you also that has some resources. If you didn't get a chance to pick one up, they are on our website. I wanted to let you know that we have abundance of things that you can do or that you can share with someone who might need help, whether that be something for drug addiction, alcohol addiction, needs counseling, someone who might be showing signs of trauma or suicide. And we have Care Solace on our website where you can click on the link and they will walk you through the process of getting help, and that is through any kind of insurance or no insurance at all. We have a lot of resources. You can call our district office and we can help you as well. We're located on 3rd Street for those of you that don't know. And also we have a fabulous resource in our district, and that is our school nurse. So I want to introduce Dr. Heather O'Beard, so there, and she's going to be here. I know our deputies, our sergeant is on a tight timeline, but she can stay after and answer questions for you as well. But so that I don't continue to take his time, I'm going to ask that. Did you want to introduce?
Of course.
Again, thank you for being here. And as people come in, we'll be able to go over the information again at the end, and again have Q&A. So thank you.
All right, Superintendent Binks said, I'm Lance Bradley, the Public Information Officer. You've probably received a lot of emails from me. It's kind of what I would like. Tonight's presentation, by Sergeant Salyer, I was interested last week. There's a lot of incredible information, a lot of incredible resources he's going to provide you, and a lot of really good stories I share with the children about the effects of fentanyl. The presentation, as well as the video stream, is going to be available on our district website, schools.com. And then after that, you'll find it on YouTube just by searching Dangerous Fentanyl. So at this time, I want to introduce Sergeant David Salyer.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me all right? All right, I gotta stand still and not walk away from this thing. I will be available afterwards for question and answers. I'll be you guys have questions, I'll stick around. So I'm with the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. I'm assigned to the Gangster Narcotics Division, and I'm assigned to our overdose response team. What that team does is we respond to drug overdose deaths in San Bernardino County. That is just in sheriff's jurisdictions. But there you can see how many call-outs we had alone last year, 115. This last weekend we hit our 96. So primarily what we do is we go out and investigate and try and find out who's selling drugs like fentanyl that are killing people out there and try and prosecute them. That's kind of our purpose, but we would much rather get involved in the front end and do things like this as far as education to prevent the problems before they even happen. So let's talk about addiction a little bit, because that's kind of the monster that feeds this whole epidemic. Addiction comes from a lot of places. A lot of addicts end up with injuries, and they end up getting prescribed medication, and they may like the way that medication makes them feel, and they end up becoming addicted to it, and they go, once the prescription gets cut off, they end up going different routes to get the medication in the illicit market. We'll talk about that. But addiction definitely is a big factor in the epidemic and where we are today. Obviously, genetics plays a role. And something we want to talk about is what are our addicts? Who are they? What do they look like? And is it a lot of times the traditional, when we think about people who overdose, people who are addicts, they're people like this, they're the homeless, they're, for lack of a better term, junkies. And something we want to talk about is that what are our addicts? Addiction effects, what do they look like? Here you see a bunch of famous people, all of them died. And is it a lot of times the traditional stand still. People like this. So these are all famous people that you've heard about, like Tom Petty, Prince, Tyler Skaggs, actually his deal. Here you see a lot of famous people, all of the that are in prison for providing drugs to them stand still. Or is it our children? Are these our addicts? Are they or they come on go to a party and give them a pill, not knowing what it is, and they end up to the reality is it's everybody. Anybody can be an addict. All ages, all spectrum. Doesn't discriminate by race or socioeconomic background. It's really everybody. But primarily we see it's people in their 20s and 30s and more males than females. The reality is it's everybody.
This is the new face of fentanyl addiction. Before, this is the face. 22-year-old Katie Bailey, and she was acquiring 22-year-old I spotted her on the script, series Fentanyl drug addict. At an accidental concert, she was covered on her last year. Katie settled in to tell her story. How she ended up living on the street 2 months ago, addicted to fentanyl.
Well, I've been using, it's actually funny, it's terrible. I don't know, I used to use it, like addicted to something or shopping or Facebook or whatever. And I did an oxy, I got into right away. And then I got my friend, I got a resident all the time. I remember the dance conference, my killer said, you know, I saw these new pills, they're bake-offs. He didn't tell me they were fentanyl because no one knew what fentanyl was yet. He just said they're 100 times stronger than the bio. I said, okay. I'm getting pretty high dollars at this point.
Oxycontin linked to baking, fentanyl posed as Oxycontin. Immediately Katie wanted nothing else.
I could buy one of these stickies, put them into 4 lines.
I could buy one of these stickies.
Okay, that's what strong. And if I took a pill, I would.
She's overdosed. A lot of time, most recently she dated. Drug addict like heroin or friends on the street who have naloxone. While the heroin was or friends on the street.
Every time you go, I'm taking my risk. I know I'm not going to die.
Every time I go, I know I'm taking a risk. I know I might die, but
doesn't matter how many times I use it, I still use it because my results are so bad.
doesn't matter how many times I use it, I still use it because it was
She and her sister attacked by a Rottweiler cross back in December. Katie was badly hurt and spent time in hospital. As she dropped, Clay starts to see.
This is the new face of fentanyl addiction. Before, Katie said she ended up living on the street for months ago.
Things that I'm often helpful of pain, especially after
I have a really addictive personality. I've always been like addicted to something, whether it was shopping
I asked Katie if she worries about herself and her future.
sometimes, I don't know. I just like to take things like one day at a time, lay it on, and just go with it, hopefully, hopefully less soon.
For now, the best Katie can hope for is to wake up from her next fix of fentanyl. Aaron Rankin, CBC News, Surrey.
So a couple of things that catch me out of that video. First of all, what caught her getting addicted to pain medication. The dog attack, and she was prescribed pain medication. She liked the way it felt. The doctor would no longer give her pain medication. So she needed more and more and started going to the illicit market where she found fentanyl. The other thing is she's overdosed 11 times before. 11 times. She knows very well that the next time she uses, she might die, but she does not care. She's going to take that risk and use again just so she doesn't feel dope sick. That is how addictive drugs like fentanyl are. You feel so terrible once you go into withdrawals with them. Let me ask you guys, how many of you went to Starbucks this morning? Come on, there's a couple have. I'm gonna pick on you, all right? I thank you. Do you go to Starbucks every morning? Fish. What happens if you, for some reason, you can't go? How do you feel? How many of you went to Starbucks this morning here? Thank you. Do you feel like a headache, lethargic? Kind of credit. So think about that. Those of you that have had, I don't want to call it a caffeine addiction, but a caffeine habit. How's that? It's an addiction. It looks like your husband's nodding his head as well. So think about that. If you guys have ever felt that. Now on that, and what do when you feel like that? You're like, oh, I need to make a cup of coffee, or hey, I need to run through the drive-thru. With fentanyl, think of it being 100 times worse. You feel 100 times worse. Are you going to want to make that cup of coffee or drive through? 100 times worse? Absolutely. You will do anything to not feel that way. And that's how addictive this drug is. So just briefly, I want to talk to you because a lot of people ask me, why are we in this fentanyl epidemic? Why are people putting fentanyl in drugs now? And I just want to explain, you will do how we got fentanyl to not feel that way. And that's the late 1990s and throughout the early 2000s, pharmaceutical companies started to over a lot of people around pain medication. Why are we in this fentanyl epidemic? Why are pharmaceutical companies started to brand their product as non-addictive? They encourage doctors to prescribe more and more as they start to feel bad. Non-addictive. They made millions and millions of dollars on this. Have any of you guys seen Dope Sick? It's a good HBO show, or Crime of the Century. It's a 2-part HBO special on this whole epidemic, how the pharmaceutical companies overprescribed these drugs, made millions and millions of dollars, telling the public it's non-addictive. Obviously, that was a huge lie. So around 2010, 2011, finally DEA and FDA gets wind of this, and they're like, wow, we have a real problem on our hands. We're going to do something about it. So what they did is they started cracking down on doctors. They told doctors, hey, you can't prescribe pills like this. We're going to start tracking you. We'll start prosecuting you. We're going to start suing you. Great idea, right? The problem is, with all their overprescription of pain medications, you now had a society of drug addicts. And like that girl right there, you saw how addictive this stuff is. So are they just going to quit cold turkey? Of course not. They're going to go into other things. If you guys remember, probably around that 10, 15 years ago, we had a huge string of people breaking into pharmacies like CVS and Save-On in the middle of the night. They were breaking into those stores to steal the pain medication because that's how addictive it was. That only lasted for so long, and there was an illicit pill market. But what they started to do is heroin made a huge comeback, and people started switching to heroin. We haven't seen heroin in 20, 30 years, but now it was a big thing again. So people started using heroin. Then 5 or 6 years ago, the Mexican drug cartels came across fentanyl, and they started to realize how cheaply they could get the products from China to make it and start putting it in other drugs. The heroin that wasn't as strong, all of a sudden they sprinkle a little bit of fentanyl on it, and now it's the strongest heroin, and every drug addict out there wants that stuff because it's the strongest. So that's how we got where we are with fentanyl today.
So if you look at it, start to see the increase in heroin, there's 300% increase in heroin overdose around that time and stuff. And what did those heroin drugs got where they got started in the prescription opioid market? So just to give you an idea, start to see the increase in heroin. Mexican drug cartels can get the precursor chemicals from China to produce fentanyl from anywhere from like $5,000 to $10,000 to a market. That $5,000 to $10,000 kilo can just make 500,000 grams 30 fentanyl pills. Those sell on the streets for anywhere from $5 to $10. Not a math assignment, but that kilo that costs about $500,000 of those pills. $10,000 at least, that's $5 million. But would you rather, as a businessman, get that kilo over China or get those chemicals to make that? Or would you rather have to grow opium poppy plants down in Mexico, and it takes 5 acres of opium poppy plants to make 1 kilo of heroin? Would you rather order the chemicals from businessmen, or have this huge target on your back because you have to grow and harvest, or hire people to entertain, grow? Obviously, easy choice. And just briefly, I want to talk about what the difference between an opioid and an opiate is. So, opioids cover all pain or agitation, pain killers. That is broken down into opiates, which are the products that come from the opium poppy. Things like morphine, heroin. Synthetic opioids are going to be your synthetic pharmaceutical drugs. Things like muscatine, oxycodone, and fentanyl. But what is fentanyl? I know you guys hear a lot about it in the news, but do we really understand what it is? It is a synthetic opioid that's made in a laboratory. It's a Schedule II controlled substance. It was originally introduced as a medical drug for pain management. You guys hear a lot. That was pretty much for people with chronic cancer, and usually for hospice patients. If you remember, a lot of people used to have those patches. Fentanyl would slowly get absorbed through your skin, but that was a very, very diluted amount of fentanyl in those patches. Right, the deadly dose of fentanyl is 2 milligrams. Fentanyl is 50 times more powerful than heroin and 100 times more powerful than morphine. Just to give you an idea, a therapeutic dose of fentanyl is 50 to 100 micrograms. So there's 1,000 micrograms in a gram. So there's 2,000 micrograms in a fatal dose of fentanyl. So these, I know you guys have probably seen these, but that's enough right there. Pure fentanyl, about 7 grains of salt, that's enough fentanyl to kill you and cause you to overdose. I hate to break it to you, but fentanyl has an evil cousin named carfentanil. It's a fentanyl analog that's used as a large animal tranquilizer, primarily in elephants. There was a seizure of several kilos of carfentanil in Riverside County. I think it was down in Hemet or Paris. We have not seen a lot of it, so I don't want to overly panic anybody, but it is something that is out there along with all kinds of other fentanyl analogs. So the other thing the cartels are doing now is they're making these counterfeit pharmaceutical pills. So they are putting fentanyl in pills and pressing them primarily down in Mexico to look like regular prescription drugs. So the biggest one we see is called an M30. That's what we call them commonly. There is a legitimate pharmaceutical M30 pill, but this is what they're pressing. Are you able to tell those apart? Not really. So when our kids are out there hanging out with their friends and somebody pulls some pills out of their pocket, are they going to be able to tell the difference between those? What's even scarier is they're making them out of Xanax bars as well. So there you see a real Xanax bar and also a fake one, or a counterfeit pharmaceutical. I'll just tell you, this time around, I've been doing narcotics for almost 5 years. I've never come across a real M30. I've come across millions of fake M30s that contain fentanyl. They're just not out there. Unless you see them in a prescription bottle with the person's name on it, you're just not seeing it. There's just millions and millions of these pills coming across our borders these days, as you can see down here in these pictures. So these pills, the M30s, they are still produced by a pharmaceutical company, but like I said, unless you're getting it from a pharmacist, you have absolutely no idea what you're taking. And I'm willing to bet lots of money that if you come across one not in a prescription bottle, it's going to contain fentanyl, just because there's that many out there. So I just want to explain how these pills are made. So like I told you, they get the precursor chemicals from China, and they take these kilos of pure fentanyl down in Mexico, and they mix them, because obviously if that pill was all fentanyl, it would be way more than 2 milligrams, and it would kill you in an instant. But it's mixed with a lot of cutting agents. They put a lot of sugars and mannitol, acetaminophen, whatever they can find to bind and mix these pills with. But where they do this mixing is maybe in someone's garage. I've heard in a bucket, I've heard in a bathtub. The bottom line is there is absolutely zero quality control when these things are produced. I know that's surprising, but it's true. So what happens is, the analogy we like to use is, remember your childhood when your mom was making chocolate chip cookies. She'd mix in the chocolate chips, and she'd do the best she could to mix it all up, right? But there'd always be that chocolate chip cookie that you pick and you're like, oh, that one has a whole lot of chocolate chips. I'm gonna grab that one. Or maybe even when you have the cookie, you look at it and go, I'm gonna take these bites over here because there aren't any chocolate chips in it. So that's what these pills are like. Gotta fly at that. These pills are just like a chocolate chip cookie. And when you get that bite that doesn't have that many chocolate chips, maybe you're just getting high. But when you get that sweet bite, that's when people are overdosing. And obviously, looking at those pills, you have absolutely no idea what is made up inside those pills. So here are examples of seizures we have had within our division. These are just hundreds and thousands of counterfeit pharmaceutical pills coming across our border that are being put into our streets and being used by our children. So what's even scarier? This picture is here from a seizure in Ohio, where they seized this Tylenol pill. Yeah, that one doesn't look the best, and it looks like it's been in a guy's pocket for a few weeks. But that pill was a counterfeit Tylenol pill containing fentanyl. These pill presses and whatnot can be bought off the dark web, and they can be made here in the States, but most of it's being done down in Mexico on a large scale level. They can make these pills look like anything. So unless, again, you are taking a pill from a pharmacy, from a doctor, you have absolutely no idea what's in it, and it is not safe.
Global leaders are marking International Overdose Awareness Day today by highlighting the dangers of synthetic opioids like fentanyl.
The drug is the leading cause of overdose deaths here in the U.S. And tonight, the DEA is now warning about the rise of rainbow fentanyl. CBSA's Rocio de la Fe has more on the brightly colored pills that are being used to attract younger people.
Tonight, the county administration building is lit up purple for International Overdose Awareness Day. 1,300 lives were lost due to drug overdoses in San Diego over the past year, with fentanyl accounting for as many as 800 deaths.
Most overdose deaths in the nation are being linked to fentanyl, a strong synthetic opioid that is up to 50 times more potent than heroin. Now, the Drug Enforcement Agency is warning of an alarming trend known as rainbow fentanyl. The drugs look like candy and come in a variety of bright colors, shapes, and sizes, and they're being used to target children and young adults.
We know that there's really no bounds to the creativity of the cartels who are selling and profiting off of drugs.
San Diego and Imperial counties account for about 60% of the fentanyl being seized around the entire country. Just last month, border officials seized more than 600 pounds of fentanyl in just one smuggling attempt. U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of California, Randy Grossman, says the new form of fentanyl is a deliberate effort by drug traffickers to drive addiction.
We know that the cartels are profit driven, and their goal is to put as many drugs in the hand of users as possible so they can drive up their profits. And they're going to use whatever creative means that they can.
Rainbow fentanyl has been seized in at least 18 states so far. The DEA states that different colors don't necessarily indicate a higher potency level, and every color should be considered extremely dangerous.
You don't know what you're getting right now. Now is not the time to be experimenting with one oxy pill or with a small amount of cocaine. That's just that experiment can cost you your life.
Grossman says he realizes that officials won't be able to prosecute their way out of the crisis and will be focusing heavily on prevention strategies. For CFLFA, CBS 8.
So the drug cartels within the last couple of months started trafficking these rainbow fentanyl. I'm sure you guys all saw it in the news within the last couple of months. Montana PD just a few weeks ago had a big seizure of these pills. We personally have not seen them, but it's just a matter of time. We have sources that say they definitely are coming across. And so they make them in the pills that they're calling them like Skittles or Smarties. And then they also make it in colored fentanyl, either in powder form or almost like that chalk type form. So how bad is this problem? I'm just going to show you kind of some of the numbers that are out there. So this is kind of a state by state in California. This is an older slide. There's from 2019, there were about 6,000. But last year in California, there was over 10,000 overdose deaths. Here kind of shows you just the upward trend of overdose deaths as a whole in dark blue. But look at the light pink year by year. Just each year, there's more and more overdose deaths from synthetic opioids from drugs like fentanyl. Last year was the first time in a year span we had over 100,000 overdose deaths, and it was 107,000. Most of those are fentanyl ODs across the country. So you ask, how bad is the problem in our county? Or I guess we're in Riverside County, but for me, San Bernardino County. As you see in 2020, we had 251. Last year, we had 317. Only 196 this year, but what you got to remember is these deaths don't officially get entered until the coroner's office does an autopsy. We send off toxicology, they get that back, which can take up to a month or two. And then the doctor has the time to sit down and complete his investigation and complete the report. So that's about a 3 to 4 month delayed process. So us being mid-October, my guess is those numbers would maybe be around July-ish. So I have no doubt that this year's numbers are going to exceed our numbers last year. So here in Yucaipa, these are our deaths just out of the city of Yucaipa. They aren't just overdose deaths. These are all fentanyl overdose deaths. So 6 deaths in 2020. Last year we had 10. This year we've already had 8. And I can tell you last week I was out on 2 in this city. So we're going to obviously exceed that in this year.
Recent overdoses are shining a spotlight on the trouble that works in the Central Valley, especially among teenagers. And these days, fentanyl is front and center.
The reason why a lot of people haven't heard of it is because it's not typically prescribed as a pill.
These aren't being produced in the United States laboratories. They're coming in from all over the world, predominantly our southern border to Mexico.
It only takes one time. It's not something that you ever want to try, ever.
And it's like playing Russian roulette. You don't know what you're getting. So fun. Yeah, you people there. Lift up your OG.
Not one, but 2 kids that were foaming at the mouth, gray, purple, completely unresponsive. I thought he was cleaning up. I thought he was reading better. I trusted him. I shouldn't have.
You don't have to meet your drug dealer anymore. You can purchase these drugs, social media, bags of paid to your house.
And every parent will tell you, God, I wish I would have known about this. How do you not know about this?
Fentanyl pills don't care about the color your skin is, how much money you make, where you live. It's an equal opportunity disruptor in a sense.
This isn't just another drug. You're not just gonna wake up with a sick to your stomach feeling in the hangover. You're not gonna wake up. That's the difference.
So that's a clip from Killer High. That was another documentary done on the crisis in the Fresno area. We actually collaborated with the team on that that works there in Fresno. All right, so how is fentanyl used? By far the two most common ways are smoking it, where they'll put either these pills or powder on tin foil, and they put a heat source, typically a lighter and a torch underneath it, and it burns and vaporizes, and then they take a straw in their mouth and they inhale the vapors. In the drug world, that's called chasing the dragon. The other way it's commonly used is either the powder or the pills are crushed up and it's snorted. The pills themselves can just be swallowed, and it's not uncommon, but it's a least common way. And fentanyl can be injected. Typically, we see that when fentanyl is mixed in heroin. Just over the last few months when we've talked to heroin users, they say we cannot find heroin that does not have fentanyl in it. It's absolutely everywhere as far as heroin goes. And they have no idea what the concentration is. And that sticky, nasty stuff, they can't mix it up. So we're seeing a lot of people dying that way as well. Right, paraphernalia, like I said, the two most common ways are smoking it. So for smoking it, you're going to see the foil with burn marks on it. A lot of times it's in the shape of a pill. A lot of times they'll let what chasing the dragon is they'll let the pill slide down the foil and they'll chase it with the straw in their mouth. So a lot of people that we find with overdose deaths, they have foil in one hand and a lighter in the other because they pretty much die right there like that in very strange, awkward positions. Obviously, like crushed up, like lines, credit cards, that kind of thing, if they're snorting it. And then just your typical paraphernalia for injecting. So the terms for fentanyl, it all kind of depends on what group you're in, but obviously the pills are called blues or M30s, the Xanax bars are called Xan or Xannies. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about perks or Norcos. So when kids are on the internet or texting people or you hear about that, they're talking about perks and Norcos or oxys. Whether they think that's what that actually is or not, they're not legitimate pills. Legitimate pills are no longer being sold. I'm not to say they're not, but it's very rare. Most of what is being sold through these are counterfeit pills that are containing fentanyl. You can see here again the M30s, the real ones on top, the fake on the bottom. These are actually counterfeit Adderall. It's a stimulant, but they're making that. That's more of the thing on the East Coast. And again, the Xanax bars. So how do opioids affect your body? It causes your body to slow down. It causes your breathing to shut down. What that causes is a condition called hypoxia, which basically means your body's not getting enough oxygen. So your pupils start to constrict, they're like pinpoint. People become pale, they start to turn blue, they kind of get clammy. Some people will actually start to itch. You guys are familiar when you get prescribed pain medication, the doctor tells you to take your medication with a full stomach, right? That's because pain medication causes nausea. Obviously, fentanyl is a very strong opioid and causes a lot of nausea. So people who are using a lot of times vomit. Something else, and it's actually very important. So it causes what we call people being on the nod. And that's just people kind of standing there and just kind of nod off. They just keep kind of nodding off, almost like they're falling asleep. But if you try and wake them up from that, they're not waking up from that. That's important. They could be getting ready to overdose. Something else we see probably in at least half of our overdoses is they'll think they're sleeping and they kind of nod off, and they'll start making this gurgling, loud, and distinct snoring sound. It's not like a normal snore, and we call that the death rattle. And it's very sad when we talk to parents and families who say, yeah, I walked by his bedroom and I heard him making this weird gurgling sound, but I figured he was just really tired. What's sad is if that parent would have known this, they might have known that that child was overdosing, and had they called for help, they could have saved him. But they just figured, understandably so, he's probably tired or he's just sleeping in a weird position. And then come to find him in the morning where they're passed away. Just one other symptom, itching and scratching. There's some in the pain medications that kind of causes your skin to crawl. And we've had several parents notice that their kids use, because every time they use, they start just scratching themselves in a weird way, for whatever that's worth. All right, so what do you do if someone overdoses? Just like any medical emergency, you're going to call 911. You're going to check regular first aid type thing, CPR, see if they're breathing, see if they have a pulse. If you happen to have Narcan, you can deploy it. We'll talk about Narcan a little bit more later, and just monitor their symptoms. Because just because they're overdosing, it doesn't mean necessarily they're going to immediately stop breathing and their heart's going to stop. But you want to monitor those symptoms and make sure they're getting the oxygen they need. So what is Narcan? Narcan is the brand name for the drug naloxone. What it is it's an opioid receptor blocker. And what that does is when fentanyl or any opioid hits your system, it hits the opioid receptors. And Narcan, for lack of a better term, plugs those receptors so it no longer impacts the body. So it reverses the symptoms, and you see people come around within a couple minutes. A couple notes on Narcan. For one, it's becoming extremely readily available these days. I hear now if you get prescribed a pain medication, they're actually giving it to you with that. There's all kinds of grants, free resources. I believe CVS, you can walk in and they'll give it to you. But Narcan, something to think about. If you deploy it on someone who overdoses, a couple things to think about. One is it wears off. Anywhere from like 30 to 90 minutes, it's going to wear off. And those plugged up opioid receptors are going to unplug. So if there's enough fentanyl in their system, they can re-overdose. The other thing it does is it causes them to become sober instantly. So you see how addictive this is. If you suddenly become sober and I'm a drug user, what am I going to do? I'm going to use again because I don't want to get that dope sick. So we've seen it several times where people will get transported to the hospital, get treated, they'll get monitored, but what are they? They're stone cold sober and they want to no longer be dope sick, so they go home and use again, and we find them overdosed the next day. So that's one thing to think about. Another is it brings them out of that overdose, and a lot of times they can be combative, and it can also cause nausea and vomiting. Just word to the west.
Investigation continues into the overdose death of a high school teenager.
Two teen boys are already behind bars, and tonight we are hearing from the family about their loss when police search for more of those responsible. KFLY's Lauren Posen is live in Hollywood now, where she spoke with that young girl's family. Lauren.
Well, Pat, now the investigation has turned to detectives trying to find the drug dealer that sold those teen suspects those dangerous pills. Now, here at the high school is a growing memorial for the teen who died, Melanie Ramos. There's flowers here, candles, and balloons with the words, "I love you," written on them.
That broken?
The aunt of 15-year-old Melanie Ramos says her niece was one of a kind.
She had like a little spice to herself. She's really a typical girl.
The teen died Tuesday night from an overdose at Bernardino High School in Hollywood. Two teens are now behind bars in connection to her death. A 15-year-old is booked on suspicion of manslaughter. He's accused of selling Percocet laced with fentanyl to Ramos and another student. When the suspect was taken into custody, Chief Michael Moore says officers found additional pills on him. And a 16-year-old is also booked on the same serious charge. He's accused of selling drugs to a third student at a park less than a mile from the high school.
It's a Russian roulette, except the weapon may have one empty chamber, and the rest of it are likely things that could kill you.
Both attended Apex, a charter school on the Bernstein campus. This mom, who came to lay flowers down at Ramos's memorial, says she told the school for months about suspicious activity.
They were aware of drug use and drug stuff on the campus, during school, after school.
LAUSD superintendent says making all schools safe in the district is a top priority.
Using children to harm children is the greatest crime, the greatest sin.
Meanwhile, the Ramos's family is planning a funeral. They don't want Melanie's death to be in vain.
Think of Melanie before you take anything, because our Melanie, we don't want you to take it. Don't take anything you're not supposed to take.
And Melanie's aunt told me that she was the oldest of two younger sisters. She was the big sister, and that the girls are taking her death very hard. They considered Melanie to be their best friend. Now, there is a GoFundMe set up for the Randall's family to help her expenses during this time. I asked them if there's going to be a vigil for Melanie that the public can attend. They say they don't know yet. Right now, they're just trying to get through the night. Reporting in Hollywood, Laura Posen, KCAL 9 News.
So can this happen to me? What we hear way too often is, no, it could never be my child. My child doesn't do that kind of thing. But the problem is people don't find out about it until their child overdoses and unfortunately sometimes dies. So that's where it's important that you guys are here and you guys are home or listening, and we start to get a little bit proactive with the education on this stuff. We've heard about this stuff all throughout our county and surrounding neighborhoods in Yucaipa. It's in high schools, it's in middle schools. I hate to tell you that, but that is the reality. So how is fentanyl being sold? The biggest offender, of course, is social media. Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, any social media platform or communication platform you can think of, these drugs are being sold. It's being sold on the internet, on the dark web. All of those kids can now have fentanyl delivered to their door through all these delivery methods. And I just want to ask you just to throw it out there, not to tell you how to be a parent, but when's the last time you looked at your child's phone? I know we trust our kids and we don't want to invade their privacy, but just something to think about. Do you know their passcode? Do you ever walk up to your child and say, hey, let me see your phone? And surprise them. And maybe that just doing that on occasion would be a deterrent enough. Because it's not just about drug use, obviously there's human trafficking and child exploitation and other stuff that goes on with our phones. I don't want to beat a dead horse and get the point, but just something to think about. So this is a flyer that went out to all the county schools. My team's job is essentially enforcement on the back end of these things. After these deaths occur, we have to go out to these scenes and kind of work it backwards. We would much rather come out and talk in community groups and schools like this and try and prevent the problems before they even happen. We understand we're not going to be able to arrest our way out of this epidemic. It's much too large. It's way too big. We would rather come out here and do some prevention methods with you on the front end to prevent our kids from getting into this stuff, for trying that pill at the party that might end up ending their life.
On the class at this time, ETA about 2 minutes.
My name is Dominic Tierno. Since I graduated high school in 2014, I've had the great honor of directing a number of documentary films about drugs and drug addiction. Our mission is to revolutionize drug education by telling real-life stories that motivate young people to make one of the most important decisions of their life, and that's the decision to not use drugs. 2020 was the worst year for drug overdose deaths that we have ever seen. In the beginning of summer in 2020, I came across this article. A 14-year-old kid from a town I grew up in that died from what appeared to be a drug overdose. He's a smart, funny guy who, like many kids, was struggling with some anxiety issues and decided that he would turn to drugs to see if he could help himself with that. What happened was he went and bought this pill, this Oxycontin pill, from a guy he had known, because he thought that pill might ease the pain of what he was going through mentally. Well, he didn't know it, but that Oxycontin pill wasn't a real Oxycontin pill. It was a fake pill. It looked just like the pill that he wanted to try, but instead of Oxycontin, it was made with fentanyl, a synthetic opioid known to be 50 to 100 times the strength of morphine. That one pill he took that night killed him almost instantly, and his mom found him dead in his bedroom the next morning. Before I could even finish that article, I'm scrolling through and I see another linked article. Not far away, around the same time, another 14-year-old dead from fentanyl. So then I go back to Google and I type in fentanyl deaths. I hit search, and then it all made sense. I saw another kid, and I saw high school students, college students, young adults, all recent, all over the country, all dead from fentanyl. And so I'm looking at that and I'm saying, these aren't just normal overdose deaths. These people think they're taking one drug, and turns out they're being killed. Why have we not heard about this?
It's a drug 50 times more potent than heroin, and doctors say just touching it can send you to the emergency room. We're talking about the synthetic opioid fentanyl.
The first time I heard about fentanyl was my sister busting my house, being like, don't touch anything in this room, it's fentanyl. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, everybody was like, So most people haven't heard of this because we haven't been talking about it. Back in 2013, when it first started showing up, only about 3% of drug users were dying from it. Now we're looking at over 50% of drug deaths being attributed to fentanyl. If Alexander could have got a lesson, I wish he knew about fentanyl. I wish he understood that fentanyl poisoning is real and that every time you try something, you're playing with your life. It is kill roulette every time you try it. As a mom, a kid that was just trying to experiment for kids. As a mom of a kid that died just wanting to experiment, I wish I could just shake you and tell you and make it real for you. But I don't know how to do that. I won't be there when you're facing these decisions. I know that if you knew the effects of his passing, it would crush them. He never intended for me to find him on his bedroom floor. He never intended for his dad to administer CPR trying to save his life while we were waiting for the paramedics. Even his 12-year-old sister wanted to run in there and try to help do CPR, but I held her back. Alex didn't intend going to an ambulance. Alex had no intentions of me seeing him lying on a stainless steel table covered with a sheet with only his head showing. Alex had no intentions of me knowing what it felt like to kiss his face for the last time. The images that I'm left with of that day replay in my mind on a regular basis. Please do not put your family through this. And please, 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 I beg of you, learn about fentanyl now. Don't wait until your best friend has died. Or a brother or your sister. Learn about it now so you can help your friends. You can tell them, you can warn them. You can be a very important part of saving lives.
This would be how much cocaine somebody would have to ingest to kill them. This is the approximate number of prescription pills one would have to ingest to kill them. This is the amount of heroin the average person would have to ingest to kill them. Fentanyl. You'd have to bring that camera up here real close to see it. This much fentanyl would kill you and I if we split it. They put fentanyl in cocaine. They put fentanyl in heroin. They put fentanyl, as we already know and talked about, in the counterfeit pills. It's odorless, it's tasteless, you don't know it's there. And when you find out it's there, it's too late. You won't even know it, you'll be dead. 2,500 people would be killed by that amount of fentanyl. Does that sound like a drug to you? Does that sound more like a poison? I was a police officer for 31 years, and during my time in narcotics, I'd never heard of fentanyl. In homicide, I saw many, many tragic things. I saw people that were killed by shootings, stabbings, beatings. Nothing that I saw at that particular time would have ever prepared me to see Jessica. I was at work. I got a telephone call from my wife, Cherie. She was frantic, uncontrollable, screaming into the phone about Jessica. And I knew something had happened. Jessica lived with her boyfriend, Nicholas. And a stupid decision in which they ordered and had some cocaine to them, to their house, resulted in them ingesting it. And my daughter, at that particular time, became forever 29 years of age. Jessica didn't want to die. She has a beautiful daughter, Alana, who is now with Cherie and I, and we are raising. And she had everything to live for. Jessica knew about fentanyl, but from talking about this issue after she died with her friends, I discovered that Jessica had a friend that had even died a couple of weeks prior to her death. And Jessica had spoken to her friends about being afraid. Well, if you knew about it, why did you even listen, sweetheart? You knew it. Why did you make that bad decision? Who knows? Those are things that you'll never answer. We're just trying to prevent from happening to somebody else.
Dealers are using social media to show off what they've got, infiltrating feeds of ever younger teens curious about this flashy lifestyle. With more addicts and overdoses by the day, they've got drivers on demand delivering any drug to your door 24/7.
Social media act has changed the game when it comes to narcotics. That goes all over the place. And just maximum amounts. Some of them are going to fall trap.
4 years ago, DEA Arizona seized 0 fentanyl. This last year, we seized enough fentanyl to kill 70 million people. You're playing Russian roulette out there when you're taking these pills and you're buying this stuff off the street.
Social media is completely changed the landscape of the drug trade. Most people start by searching for what they think are prescription medications, and
that's what they have. But what you have to be careful about is what you're asking for, what you get. Can be two different things. And if you're buying stuff from somebody online, their bottom line is they're just looking to make a quick buck. They don't have your best interest in mind. They'll tell you whatever you want to hear. Unless you're getting these drugs from your doctor or a licensed pharmacy in a bottle that has birth name on it, you may as well assume these drugs are fake. You're not getting the real thing. Fentanyl's literally taken over the drug. It's in everything. It's in meth, it's in cocaine, obviously counterfeit pills that are out there. We're starting to see it showing up now in marijuana. The people who make this stuff, who are putting fentanyl in everything, they have one goal: to keep you hooked. Fentanyl is highly, highly addictive. They're going to trick you into thinking you're getting something you're not, to take you down that rabbit hole, to get you hooked on fentanyl, and have you become addict. Because to that, you're a customer. You'll be a returning customer at that point. One of those times, you're going to get enough fentanyl to kill you. Alex was in her bedroom at night, getting ready for bed. She went on social media in search of oxycodone. It wasn't hard for her to find a drug dealer. And she had what she thought was oxycodone delivered to our house. One pill had enough fentanyl to kill 5 people. My daughter took half of this pill and died instantly. In an instant, my life was changed forever. My last memory of my daughter is of her being pulled out of the gurney. Saw my daughter brought into this world, and I saw her leave this world. I have 4 daughters, a beautiful life. Every time we take a family picture, I don't see who's there, I see who's busy. It's an odd feeling to looking forward to dying, because you know that's when your heart will be made whole again. Alex would never live.
The end of the world at the palm of my hand. If you can't come with me, I'll understand.
It was March 31st. That evening was one of those special evenings we had had in a long time. I told him to come downstairs. And I wanted to hug him. I didn't know why. He came down the stairs and he hugged me and he said, "Dad, I'm so sorry for all the things that I had put you through in the past." And I said, "Don't worry about it, Daniel. You're just a kid and you're just learning. You got a great future coming ahead. Just so proud of you. You have no idea." All right, Dad, good night. Love you. Good night, son. I love you too. See you tomorrow morning. Next day, about 8 o'clock in the morning, when I walked into this room, he was in a lying position facing up against the headboard with his hands over his chest. And I saw his eyes. Had a little blue on top of his lips. I screamed at the very top of my lungs. "Dad! Dad! Dad!" I called the paramedics. They carried him down the stairs and put him on the first floor. Started doing chest compressions. And then they took him to Los Angeles Children's Hospital where we were put in the waiting room. Later on that evening, a team of doctors came in. And they said that your boy is just a shell of the boy that he was before. He's not coming back. My only child. We couldn't protect him. I couldn't save his life. I couldn't save my son, Daniel. My son is gone. It wasn't supposed to be this way. He was supposed to graduate from high school this year. You love your son. You respect your son. You love life. You have a choice. Because it is between life or death. This is no joke. You can and will die. How do I know this? I can tell you that I've met thousands on thousands of parents nationwide. I wish somebody had sat me down and had this talk with me about what fentanyl does to me. I didn't get that chance. You do.
You know, there's always been one main problem with the films that we make. And it's the reason why we try to keep them as real and as relatable as possible. People just so commonly think that it will not happen to them. I'm talking about great people, nice people, cool people, intelligent people with big plans for the future, big potential. Gone because of one choice they didn't know would end their life. Fentanyl is coming for anyone and everyone. So the most important message that I can give to kids, to teens, young adults, anybody, is the same old message we've heard time and time again. And that's to really get serious about not even trying a drug. You see, back when we first started, I was telling kids not to use drugs because you might get hooked, you might get addicted. Now there's not even time for that. Now it's don't try drugs because you might actually not wake up tomorrow. You might actually not get another chance. One choice is all it takes. If you don't believe that, I guarantee you, at this point, there was someone very similar to you who wished they could be here right now to look into the camera and look into your eyes and say, don't do it. Please don't do it. Please, I wish I wouldn't have done it. Don't do it. Don't risk your life. So my question for you is, are you going to listen? Or will it be your family and your friends holding your picture, wishing they could have been there to tell you?
This is my son, Alexander. He died at 14 years old from fentanyl poisoning.
This is our daughter, Jessica. She was 29 years old when she was killed by fentanyl.
This is my daughter, Alex. She was murdered at 20 years old by a drug dealer who sold her a counterfeit pill made of fentanyl.
This is my son, Daniel Joseph Portland Johnson, killed at the age of 16 by illicit fentanyl.
My son.
Just let that come from me. If you can't come with me, I'll understand.
So that video was produced by a group known as Void, Victim of Illicit Drugs. They're a nonprofit organization, obviously, parents of children who have lost their lives to fentanyl. They're Southern California based for the most part and very close to our community. If you are interested in that video, it's on YouTube. Their goal is to get that video in front of as many people as possible. With that, I really appreciate you guys coming out and taking an interest in this and realizing that being proactive about this problem is really the best thing. But with that, I'm happy to answer any of the questions you may have. Come on. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just not for you. Like, what makes a kid even want to like go online to find one kill? You know what I mean? What are the key things like buzzwords? Or is there anything that like I just have troubles? What actually?
Right. So I was told for the viewers at home to summarize the question. So you're asking why would a kid even want to try something like this or get it?
I mean, and think that it's gonna be safe. I have trouble grasping.
Yeah. So yeah, essentially, why would a kid go online, try and buy this pill, and why would they think that would be safe? It's a good question. I don't know that I have a great answer, but why would a kid try marijuana? Why would a kid try cigarettes? Kids tend to think they're invincible and things will never hurt them. They heard from their friends at school, it's a dare. They want to feel what it's like or try it or whatever the case may be. They may have heard from a friend like, yeah, those pills are dangerous, but if you only do a quarter, you just get high. So I don't want to say there's a ton of common sense behind it, but kids are kids and they're going to make tough decisions. And I think that's why it's important that we're proactive and we talk to our kids to make them understand that so they don't make that choice. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what age do you think we should be talking to the kids about, or even Bill Kaufman as well?
So the question was, at what age should you start talking about kids taking pills or getting into fentanyl? As a non-parent, I'm probably not the best one to ask. I would say at whatever age you feel comfortable having that conversation. It's kind of like at what age do you start the birds and the bees talking? I can't tell you that. You know the relationship with your children. Anybody else offer any parental opinions? Yes, sir.
Our sixth grader has talked about it a little bit at her school. Yeah, so at sixth grade, so I don't know how it is, but at sixth grade, they're talking about it.
Yeah, for those of you at home, a gentleman commented that someone as young as a sixth grader had said it had come up in conversation in their school. So at what age? I've heard stories of as young as middle schools. It wouldn't surprise me if it's in elementary schools. That's how scary it is. And are they really mature enough to understand the magnitude of what they're experimenting with until it's too late? I think we all kind of say no. So probably the earlier the better. It's just kind of up to you as a parent when you kind of want to phrase that conversation and word it best to them. But I don't think having that conversation is really going to hurt. It's obviously in the news everywhere. The story I showed with the kids in high school and the rainbow fentanyl, it's all over social media, it's all over everywhere. So it's out there. They're going to hear about it. It's better to have it probably explained from you as well, rather than just listening to a news article or whatever. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What options do we have at schools right now for prevention, like an open door app policy where kids can go in and not be judged?
we're not being penalized to say they need help or they know something or anything like that, because what I see is that kids are just wanting to get high, they're not intentionally wanting to die. And because they're teenagers or they start experimenting at a very young age for whatever emotional, just being a teenager, it's gonna happen. They're gonna try something. And because of this, because it's so like fentanyl everywhere, what can we do where they won't be scared to go talk to someone without being in trouble, or they can just be educated or get counseling or that?
So for those of you at home, the question was essentially, what do we have in place where a kid can feel comfortable coming forward with information, or if they know a kid who has a problem, something like that. Honestly, I would probably defer to the school on that, because me on the law enforcement side, I probably don't have the answer. So I'll defer.
Also, just to backtrack for a moment, I don't know if you're all in my age bracket, I think you're all younger, but my parents, my dad was a detective, and he always said never take candy from a stranger. And I think one of the scariest things, sorry, it makes me nervous for our kids, because they're disguising the candy as the drugs as rainbow. And so this is the time to have a conversation with your kids. You do it in your way, and we're going to come alongside you and partner. But I think that, especially with Halloween coming up, we need to make sure our kids are aware that you don't take candy from your neighbor at school. You bring your own candy and make sure that they know that. And then in terms of partnering as far as working with our students, we have counselors, we have behavioral health counselors, we have social workers. These are highly trained individuals, and they have open door policies. And kids can go in. I think what we need to do is a partnership. You see this room, 50 plus people online, 50 plus people. We need your help in making sure you're telling a neighbor about these things, and they can come in and watch the video with us, but we need to get the word out. So I know everybody's busy in their lives, but this is not negotiable. This work is not negotiable. So I'll give you my back, I'm sorry. But I want you to know that there are safe places for our kids to go, and they can go to their counselors, they can go to their administrators, they can talk to our nurses. They are aware, and we do have kids come in, and we do get them extra services, and we do partner with our parents. But what we need is for the voice to become stronger, so that you're also encouraging those conversations. You know, the peer relationships are always the strongest in high school, so we try to encourage those peer relationships to also be responsible for one another's wellness.
Yes.
Come back now, thank you for this video, but in addition to this community information, what specifically is the sheriff's department doing to be proactive to try to combat? Because we talked a lot about that supply and demand, right? How do we eliminate the demand? Maybe this is the issue.
Right, so you're asking what else is the sheriff's department doing about cutting off the supplier, or the demand at the user end? Right, yeah, so this is new to all of us, but I think a lot of what we're trying to do is through education, through programs like this. This being Red Ribbon Week, I'm almost speaking every day this month to different school groups, community groups, different online platforms, that kind of thing, to get this word out here. If you're talking about cutting off the supply, we have major narcotics gangs who are trying to intercept those drugs. Unfortunately, there are policies with relatively open borders where a lot of drugs are coming into our communities right now. But we're doing the best we can. I'm sure you see the press releases and whatnot. I know San Bernardino Police Department just had a big press release where it was $20,000 or $200,000 bills that they just seized. So we're trying. Obviously, the war on drugs is tough. I don't know that we're ever going to win it, but what I always propose when we get asked that is, what would our society be like if we didn't try and fight it? And I think we are serving as a deterrent. My team's going after the people who are selling these drugs. trying to, they're known selling fentanyl to kids that are, that's killing them. And we're charging these people with murder, and there's other federal charges that we can bring against them to try and, if nothing else, serve as a deterrent from people doing this kind of thing.
The movie that you just had.
Yes.
Can that be shown in the school to the students, right? I mean, wow, that hits, so it's like.
All
You
four-
get it with the.
All four of those parents,
Yeah.
educate, I know that. We've been on Zoom meetings, we've been involved, and they educate.
So just for those at home, she was just asking, could Dead on Arrival be shown to the students? And I believe in a side conversation that is going to be shared on the district website. Go ahead.
I would just say that it is going to be shared on the website along with the WeTip hotline for anybody who knows any sales that may be going on, so that we can work with our partnership. But we also would really, we're going to push and encourage our parents to sit and watch it with their children.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Yes.
We talked a lot about all of the drugs that is showing up in, and I just out of curiosity, because I feel like music festivals have become really popular, and they have like their own set of drugs that kids take there. Are they also showing up?
Yeah. Yes. So we just worked, so Nocturnal Wonderland, I don't know if it's the one up at Glen Helen Pavilion, about a month, 6 weeks ago, an electronic dance music festival. We had 4 overdoses at that. 2 of those were fatal. So those are cases we responded on. So yeah, we are seeing fentanyl showing up in drugs like what people would call ecstasy or Molly or MDMA. In pretty much anything. And just kind of the thought behind that is, I mean, we're seeing it in, we've had several cases where people think they're buying cocaine. They just go to snort a line thinking it's cocaine, and they're passing out, sometimes waking up, sometimes not. We had a case where 2 victims, where they both fell out. One woke up to find the other one dead. So it is getting into everything. They're trying to make the drugs more addictive, so they're going to them as a source of supply for that drug rather than another dealer, because they become that addictive to it. They're going to want that same exact drug again. And kind of going back to the coffee analogy, if you have that coffee that's that good and makes you feel good, you're going to keep going back to that product, not try someone else. Yes. No problem.
So like my husband goes, this doesn't make sense, because if they're killing everybody, where's their gonna be customers, right?
Yeah.
But I guess they're selling it as it's Russian roulette, basically, right? So
Right.
they get addicted, they want it, but they never know if it's gonna be.
Right, so the question is, and I get it asked all the time, is why are the Mexican cartels putting fentanyl in drugs when they're gonna kill off their customer base? I truly believe they're not trying to kill somebody, they're trying to create that perfect time, and they're trying to get people addicted. And I think that's why you're starting to see the rainbow fentanyl. They're trying to get kids addicted, they're trying to get more people addicted so they can sell more and more to them and basically create their customer base. Obviously, there's no quality control, so they do lose some customers. My guess is they're not losing a whole lot of sleep over that. But if you look at the number of customers they're acquiring versus how many they're losing, I think the acquisition's going to be a whole lot higher. Any other questions? Yes.
That's fine. At least for me, I know we have right here at the stores, people speaking Asian language, some European, Spanish. So why is the school district in the county trying to address those families?
We have our family learning center where we have translation available, and so we'll redo this presentation via translation and audio for any parents that would like to have that. And I would like to point out, we have Bob Jones, Deputy Jones, who's our school resource officer in the audience with us, and I want you to know that he's a great asset to us as well. If you're thinking that something might be wrong with someone, a friend of your friends, a friend of your kids, a friend of anyone, it's important that, that you give us the information or you give it to the sheriff's department.
Sure. Any other questions you guys have? Yes. We'll find out. I don't, so there's been a lot of stuff in the media about drugs mixed with candy. I don't know if you saw the post about drugs and tricks or whatever. A lot of that was misconstrued. The only way I've seen these drugs mixed in like food, like cereal or candy, is they're trying to transport it across country. And if they get stopped, they want it to look like candy or look like cereal. They're not actively trying to put it in kids' cereal or have somebody go to a grocery store to buy that kind of thing. I'd say common advice, like we always give, inspect your kids' candy if it's not a normal wrapper, it doesn't look like, right? Obviously, you probably don't want to mess around with it. I've never heard of an issue with this in the last couple of years, but Halloween's been a little bit limited with COVID in the last couple of years. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
How often have you had presentations like this with the students?
Quite often. There's only so many of us, and my team of 5 investigators are actively working those investigations, so I try and do a lot myself.
At the schools?
Yes, we have done them at the school, and actually what brought me coming here is I did a presentation online through the county superintendent, and it was streamed into any school that wanted to log on. And I believe there were like 200 or 300 students across like 20 different schools that logged in. So we are trying to get into the schools as well.
Class.
I'm sorry?
During class.
Yes, during classroom. Yeah, it's just obviously a large county, a lot of classrooms and stuff. That's why we try and get some stuff online or do streaming platforms, just because we can reach more people in less time. As far as me, I'll be hanging out afterwards. If any of you guys want to come up and ask any other questions. For those of you at home, that is my email address if you want to email me any questions or follow up or anything. And did you want to touch on Hurricane?
I can.
Sure.
If we can just have a few more minutes of your time, I do want to ask Dr. O'Hare, our school nurse, to come alongside and talk to us a little bit about what we do have on campus and the training that we've had with the Narcan issue here, that's the piece that needs to be in place in case of. So I just wanted to briefly tell you about that, so you know.
I'll be really quick and brief, just to let you guys know, as soon as the state supported this, supported having Narcan in the schools, our district jumped on it right away. I worked with Kelly Inks and the rest of the team to make sure that we started working on it to get Narcan in our schools, doing the training for all of our schools. So we do have Narcan in every single one of our school sites, including elementary school sites. We don't anticipate an elementary school student, having the same effects as our middle school or high school students, but they could accidentally take something, and we want to be prepared for that. So we do have those doses available in the health offices at our elementary schools, at the middle schools and high schools. We have done training with our administrators. I went to our administrators leadership meeting, so all of our administrators in the district have been trained on our Narcan administration. I've also gone to each school, including our continuation high schools. So I've been to Pepper High School, Mesa View, Kirkview, Oakview, and Green Valley, and have done training with our campus monitors / security officers, and they are carrying it on them. Not every single one of them, as it is a voluntary thing for them to do. But we do have those officers that on campus, our security and campus monitors that are carrying it on them. So we have it available on our campuses, and we've really been proactive with the training. We have lots of staff, including teachers, that are now asking for the training. So I am going out and doing that training for them as well. So any questions about that? All right.
Can you thank Sergeant Salyer, please? We appreciate your time. This will be posted on our website. If you like to share it with any of your friends. We also encourage you, right now, we're still using ETIP. We're looking for a platform that our students might think is, you know, a little hipper for them. So, but for all of us that know what WeChat is, that's a great anonymous place for you to report any kind of activity you think is worthy for us to know or for behind the sheriff's department to know. I so appreciate you coming out. I appreciate our online listeners and viewers as well. And again, what a great partnership that we have with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.